And can I just take this opportunity to welcome everybody to this afternoon's APPG on Muslim women. This afternoon, we're talking about women smashing the concrete ceiling. I'm loving the fact that we're describing it as concrete, not glass. Requires an awful lot more effort. And later on, Naz is going to be doing a conversation with Professor Farah Bhatti, who's a consultant cardiothoracic surgeon. A hugely inspiring role. So we're really looking forward to that. But I've just got to do some housekeeping rules first. So this event is being recorded, just to make you all aware of that. And we would like to encourage all of you to tweet, if you can, using the hashtag APPG Muslim Women, and choose to challenge, which of course is the theme of this year's International Women's Day, which I will speak about a little bit later. And of course, copying in the Muslim Women's Network handle, which is at Muslim Women UK. So we're going to have some conversations in a bit about the barriers some of us have faced in our careers and how we've broken through them. But Naz will give you a proper introduction to our main speaker later. But I'm just going to hand over to Naz, who's going to lead us in a minute's silence.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to be here at this very important event, marking International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day for those of you who have not spoken to. And if we can start by a minute's silence, because we've had the last week has been really, really devastating on so many fronts for the issue of women. And I think it's really important that we mark it not just for what's happening right now, but what's, so many women die every single week. Domestic violence. We know that during COVID, the pandemic, domestic violence has gone up for all the women, including Sarah Everard. And we've seen the scenes, and there's ongoing discussion about that. But if we can have a minute silence to begin with for all the women who have lost their lives, who have been killed tragically, and leave their families behind. Yeah, so if we can go for that first. Now, time. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to hand it back to Caroline.
Thanks for that, Naz. And I think it's really important to reflect. So we should be celebrating International Women's Day and a whole month of events. And actually last week was an incredibly tough week for women. I was going to say here, but women globally. So, we saw Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe freed from prison, but not able to leave Iran. We saw the horrendous kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard. And I'm very conscious that this event is being recorded. So please, can we be really careful about what we say around that case, because it is crucially important that that it goes to trial and that the individual accused gets a fair trial, because none of us wish to see that in any way used as a reason why he can't go to trial. So I think that's really important. But I think those images that we saw from Clapham on Saturday night shocked many of us. And we were talking before the meeting started about how the particular image of Patsy Stevenson being sat on by police officers really, really shocked people. But actually, those are images that we see when it is Black women or women around the world being sat on by police officers, whether it's in Myanmar or other countries around the globe, whether it's women who are victims of the war in Yemen. And I think all of us are feeling very strongly that this is a difficult time to be celebrating International Women's Day. I was just going to kick off with a very quick sort of 10-minute conversation with some of the parliamentarians on the call this afternoon. And I have warned Afzal, and Nuz is still with us, that we're going to ask them some questions about how they have chosen to challenge over the course of the last week, or actually how they've chosen to challenge, and I know that they all have, over the course of their careers. And I always, I use my role as chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee, as I say, to challenge the government every single week. And I always start off a week thinking, all right, this week I'm not going to be talking to the media, I'm not going to be criticising the government, I'm going to be, a dutiful, loyal backbencher, and then something goes wrong. And I spend my entire week being challenging and difficult, and I know that that's in my nature. And I first think I became aware of Naz when she stood in a particularly challenging and unpleasant election. And I didn't know Naz at all, but saw what she was going through and saw some of those horrific televised, what do we call them, hustings panels, and thought, my goodness, that girl clearly has enormous strength to be able to go through all that and still come out of it with determination to get to Parliament and to do great things while she's there. But I think I'm going to turn to Nuz first and ask Nuz to share with us just 30 seconds, a minute max, of one of the things that she has chosen to do as part of the Choose to Challenge, or something challenging that she's done in her career to date. So Nuz.
Thank you, Caroline, and it's great to follow you and also to follow Naz, obviously. Gosh, a minute, where do I start? Well, standing as a Conservative MP and being the first female Muslim ever elected, I would consider quite challenging. There were moments, Caroline, back in the day, there were moments, but I'm here now. I also, when I was at the BBC World Service, I ended up doing a tremendous amount of work in Afghanistan. And Caroline, you might not know this, but my name is actually a masculine name. So when I turned up to implement this project, I think they thought it was going to be a man, not a working class Pakistani Muslim girl from Small Heath, which I think troubled them enormously. But I survived and I was able to come back home and then stand as a Conservative MP. And what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm very grateful for your support, Caroline, and all the parliamentarians on the call, is that I'm doing a hell of a lot of work trying to understand if genocide is taking place against the Uyghur. And once again, when there's any abuse of any types of people, it's always the women at the front of the queue. It's the women that are being, forced into sterilizations, they're forced into abortions, having their children removed. But they're always the last segment of society to be discussed when we're trying to discuss atrocities. So that's the challenge I'm giving to my fantastic government at the moment. And I'm hoping next week we can maybe change the dial on that. That's all I've got, Caroline, in a minute. If you gave me more, I would have had more, but hey ho.
Fantastic, Nuz. Thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, I forget that Nuz is one of the most persuasive colleagues when it comes to backing her on her genocide amendment and challenging the government over that. Afzal, what really matters to us as women is to have allies. So what have you been doing over this past week to mark International Women's Day and to choose to challenge?
Thank you, Caroline. First of all, it's a pleasure actually to be here with you. For me, I suppose I want to take you back a bit further. In a sense, for me, I have two daughters and a son. And from day one, I have made sure I treat them equally, make sure they have equal opportunities. And what we normally say is, Alhamdulillah, all three have done really well. They're all professional, getting on with life. So I think starting from your home is the key. And then the second is where we are today. I mean, I used the International Women's Day debate in Parliament, and I highlighted the idea that all the wars, the worst sort of effect is on women. And in this case, I highlighted Uyghur, like Nusrat, and I also highlighted my mother is Kashmiri, so I highlighted the suffering of the Kashmiri people in the occupied Kashmir. And then this week also, you know about the police bill going through. We know exactly some of the stuff here Naz has touched on, yourself has touched on. So there's a lot we need to do in order to make sure that they are able to move around freely in the society, on the streets. And that's one of the reasons why I'm opposing the bill itself and saying that the government needs to reach out and let's work together to bring in some of these changes that we need.
Thanks, Afzal. That's good of you. And I am going to go to Naz. She doesn't get off without having to tell us what she's been doing to challenge government stereotypes, whoever she wants to have challenged this week. I know she will have.
So I think it's not this week. It's just been about International Women's Day and literally the Sarah Everard stuff and the amount of women that have been killed by abusive partners. But I think there's challenges. I mean, my first challenge, I think, was with my conception, because I was, it was my father's biology that determined my gender, but I was born a girl. And therefore I was, but the very existence of the challenge, because I wasn't the wanted boy. So, and then you come fast forward to 40 odd years, and then you've got the likes of George Galloway throwing around my nikah nama and saying whether I was forced into a marriage or not, whether I was 15 years old or 16 years old. And you come into Parliament, and then you have, another vitriolic following on from that, another vitriolic election. And I think a lot of us, just the fact that you're there, and Caroline, you yourself, the fact that you as a woman are chairing the Women's Select Committee and the Inequality Select Committee, and you're challenging these stereotypes, Nuz being there as the first Muslim in the Conservative Party. You know, I think that in itself is the very existence of you guys is challenging every day, and that supports me because we support each other. Nuz and I came in the same year. I think, Caroline, when did you come in? I think, was it
2010?
2010, yeah. So you're ahead of us, but you know, the fact that you're there is a challenge in itself, because you're challenging that stereotypical idea of what Parliament should look like and what it was set out to do. And I say this often: Parliament wasn't set out for women. It's not set up to encourage women, and women had to make that statement, and then add a bit of colour onto it, add a bit of religion and culture onto it, add that into the mix, and it's like we're even further down the pecking order, you know, whether we're there. So I think, you know, I think just being here is in itself choosing to challenge the fact that the Muslim Women's Network UK have, you know, and I'm looking forward to inviting Farah and talking to Farah, but the fact that we're here, that's me challenging.
And quite right too. And I sometimes forget that actually each one of us just being there is a triumph in itself. And I always say that is that I'm there and I'm difficult and high profile, so that there are other girls all around the country who point at me and go, well, you know what, if she can do it, anyone can do it. And you know, and I know that I say that from a position of enormous privilege, but it's what I try to do every single week. Is if I get contacted by a young woman who says, how can I do what you're doing, I make the time to reply. I make the time to give some, you know, half decent ideas to, I think. And I forgot to say at the beginning, so not last week, I think the week before last, when Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, gave a statement in the House about vaccine take-up and what they were doing to reach out to different communities around vaccine take-up. I deliberately challenged her to see what she was doing to reach out to women's voices in different communities, because I'm very conscious that sometimes when government is looking for people that it can contact to promote whatever the initiative is, the lazy, the instinctive response is to look at me and say, well, we've brought on board XYZ many mosques and we've spoken to all of the imams, and you know, this is all going brilliant. I say, how many female Muslims have you spoken to about this? And so I did mention the Muslim Women's Network UK in the chamber a couple of weeks ago, just to make them keep thinking. And I regard that as part of my job, is to ask the challenging questions, just to make them pull up a bit and go, oh, yeah, we should have been doing that, or we must do that.